why don't we get this party started? Bernard, let me kick it over to you. Again, I'll be monitoring questions. Please do jump in as you have them. I'm sure we'll have a few. So I'll kick it over to you and we can get started.
Right. Well, Camilla, thank you very much and for having me. And really looking forward to the RevOps AF in San Diego at the end of the month. So it's going to be exciting. And thank you all for attending and looking forward to doing a crash course on one part of the topic of the workshop that we've got and just talking about quotas and targets or targets and quotas. Just, high level overview and just some, guidance on maybe how to set them and think about it as you think about your own organizations of what probably the guardrails to put in place to set accurate targets and quotas.
Wonderful.
Right, so with that, I'll just start to present and you should be able to see my screen now. You can see my screen?
Yep, looks great.
Excellent. Okay, great. And please stop me if there's any questions along the way. We've got a few slides to get through. And just raise your hand or put it in the chat. Okay, so crash course on quota assignment. Over my years of setting targets and quotas, it's never easy. And even once you've set it and you think you've done it perfectly, within a week someone's asked for a change or a change being approved and you change the quotas. So, and that just throws everything off because it happens in one department or one region or one team and not the others. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to run through some concepts to think about on again, those guardrails of how we can set and get a bit more scientific and organized as setting targets and quotas. So as mentioned, myself, Ernest Schmidt, I've been in operations and enablement for 20 plus years now, and mainly for fast-growing SaaS companies. So Forcepoint, WebSense back in the day. Actually, was based out of San Diego. I got to spend a lot of time there. That's why I'm really looking forward to going back at the end of the month. It's been a long time. Aruba up in where you live, Camilla, and Dylan with Aruba Networks, and then Citrix and Sage. And we founded Lative with Lara a couple of years ago, and that's really a platform to think about performance, efficiency, and planning, and help deliver profitable, efficient growth, because that's the world we live in. But to deliver profitable, efficient growth, you've really got to connect this top-down planning, which is targets and quotas, with your bottoms-up operational data. And that's what we're going to talk about, one component to that. So the full workshop will be 80 plus minutes at the end of the month in San Diego, and that's going to be talking about the building blocks ready to profitable, efficient growth, and connecting your top-down sales plans to that bottoms-up performance and capacity data and operating data. But today, as mentioned, we're going to focus on targets and quotas. The rest of the session, and hoping you'll all be there to attend, will be on the performance and how you manage sales performance through productivity, thinking about efficiency and the costs that you bring in so that you can see your return on investment, and just smart ways of how to be able to do that. And ultimately, a lot of that data is then going to be able to tell you what capacity the teams can deliver now and in the future. So, and that's how we bring it all together. And this is the first session to be able to do that. So really the shift to strategic sales performance and planning, this is happening, right? This is how organizations are starting to look at this concept of sales productivity being the center of the universe for us in RevOps, and how we think about the actions that we take in, or the strategic initiatives that we drive in, or the comp plan designs, whatever it might be, that on the right there, sales plan and compensation design, even the analytics of what we measure or what we don't measure. The process, super important. What's the processes, and are those documented and managed? And then the technology, the tech stack that sits underneath that, and how you then align the revenue alignment across from not just sales, but it could be customer success, or even into the world of marketing. So if we start with the sales productivity being the center, and that being the year, and what we define in sales productivity is the yield per rep per unit of time. So how much does someone generate on average over the period of time? And it's not just everyone, it's how many people could sell for that period of time. So really important to just make sure we define it correctly. And then if we define it that way, and that becomes our center, how do we then start to shift our reporting to start looking at this? Because fundamentally, if sales productivity is not going up and it's going down, well, then we might as well stop everything we do, because the whole intent of revenue operations and enablement is to increase productivity, or at least maintain it. And there may be reasons or markets or segments where it does drop. Mature markets, you would expect a natural decline. There might be higher attrition and so forth. But that all needs to be factored in. But if we do start there, then we can start to shift to be a more strategic approach to revenue operations or sales operations and enablement, and certainly the planning element that's all around that. The other piece, just to call out on this, finance is super important. Your best friend. There's not very few times that I felt I was in an organization where I wasn't connected with the finance business partners and FP&A. It's very important because the two organizations have got to work well, and they work hand in hand, right? Can't really work without money, and we need that investment and to build the confidence within the FP&A teams to give what you need, and also they need the data, the sales data, to be able to do their planning more accurately. So very important to always be thinking about the finance element, of course. Okay, so getting on to how to set targets and quotas. Let's start with what are targets and quotas. So let's just separate them into two: sales targets and sales quotas. So really, the way we view it is you know, over the years, think about it, is that really a target is a long-term objective. You've got a target to hit for your company for the year, the fiscal year. It might be a 1 year, it might be a 2 year or 3 year plan. You might even have a 5 year plan of where the organizations want to get to. So you're going to have targets that you need to set, and that's going to be determined by markets that you go into. It might be determined from deal sizes and ASP, average selling prices, that need to go up, and so forth. There's a number of factors that get brought into that. But then there's also then what you need is the next layer down is the quotas. Well, how do we operationalize the targets so that we can start to basically start to head towards this long-term objective of a target? And quotas then tend to get set at a individual level, of course. As if you're an accounts executive, you're going to have a number to hit, and your variable component is tied to that. We'll talk about that in a bit. But it also goes back up. Managers are going to have quotas, you know, directors, VPs, CRO, and so forth. Sometimes CRO doesn't get the quota. They don't have the luxury of any over assignment. They've just got to get the finance number, and with the team, they'll be able to deliver on that. So that's how we think about targets and quotas. So why are they so important? You know, I think I won't read that all out. It's on the screen for you. But it's just getting organized and being structured. How do you take a high level number and get that distributed to a salesperson that's sitting on the ground? So one of the ways I think in simplistic terms I've always thought about it is, you're going to get a number to hit, call it 10 million, and you might have 10 salespeople to do it. Divide one by the other. Everyone's got to get 1 million, and that's effectively it, right? You might get some additional headcount to do that, or you might not. And that might change it. But then, of course, there's all the things we're going to talk about now that impact that simple calculation. Just one call out, though, before we do move off this, is just, it's really important that we get this right. You know, again, I think some of us may have found ourselves in organizations where you start to set targets too high, or you set quotas too high. And that can really have a detrimental impact on the sales organization's health. And when you start to see your attrition ticking, you know, up into the 15, 20, 25, even 30%, it's very difficult to hit any number. And the answer is not just increased quotas, because that doesn't solve the problem. What we've got to do is we've got to be more realistic. And by doing that, we start to create healthier organizations. And of course, healthier organizations always land up being high-performing organizations, will tend to be. Okay, so step one. Step one is taking the target and being able to then distribute that from finance of what you've been given down to a sales rep. So what we call this is the over-assignment ratio. So again, each organization is set up differently. Each organization is going to have different levels that you operate within. But let's just take an example here of 5 levels. So you got the finance target of 5 million. That's what the business needs to hit. That's what goes out to the investors, shareholders, or the street. And to do that, what you do is you say, well, right, if we got a VP, well, then we're going to slightly uplift that target by 5%. which means we're going to roll out 5.250 million to the VP. So the VP's target, they've got to hit 5.250. Then we go, well, the director then needs to hit, we're gonna uplift them, they've got to hit 5.5 million, and so on. Managers at 15%, so it's 5.7, and then the salesperson or your account executives are going to get 20% uplift, which means all in all, the total sales direct sales quota team needs to get to 6 million. So, and the reason you're doing that is to give yourself cover from top to bottom, given that people come and go. There's lots of data movements that happen, attrition, as I mentioned earlier, people on holidays, maternity cover and leave, and so forth. There's many reasons of what's needed. So you build in the cover. Now, that looks lovely to get to 20%. In reality, it's really hard to get 20% over assignment because you uplifting the quota is quite high to those targets. And generally, you might hover in around 10 to 15% from finance target to sales rep. And the other big reason for this is that throughout the year, there's quota changes that happen. There's not many organizations, I think any of us have been in where the quota hasn't changed. And generally, it changes down most times. It's always easier to take quotas down than actually put them up. So by doing that, you start to eat away at this attrition. So you start off with your plan, in the example here, 20%. You're probably going to get to the third or fourth quarter, and you might land up with 8% left between what your finance number is and what's actually over assigned, or even less. And that's when things start to run really tight, and then the finance number starts to become at risk. So I hope that all makes sense, but really important to think about this of what those over assignments should be within your organization. But again, back to the earlier comments in the earlier slide, it needs to be realistic. It's very easy to say, oh, let's just roll out at 30%. That's not always the right way to do it, because then less people are going to hit their numbers, less people make money. You can start creating unhealthy sales organizations. Okay, step 2. So determining the seasonality. So now we've got an idea of how those targets are now turning into quotas, and now we've got to distribute those quotas throughout the year. So this is where we start to distribute it, but through seasonality. Generally, if you've been operating for a few years, you're going to have a pattern of when the business comes in, and that's your seasonality. The seasonality can be different depending on what region you're in. For example, if you're in the United States or North America, the seasonality is going to be different in the summer months versus what it might be in Europe, and so forth. So that needs to be factored in depending on where you are in the world. The seasonality can be different. Your seasonality can also change depending on what vertical you're in, what industry you're selling into. There's cycles that happen. If you're selling into governments, education, and so forth, that can impact the seasonality. But really important to understand the seasonality, and that means you've got to understand where you're selling, and what those trends tend to be like. And the reason for that, let's say we're looking at the screen and we've got a nice distribution there of Q1 is going to be a 25% quarter, Q2 23, Q3 22, and Q4 is going to be 30%. That gives us 100% of the 10 million we roll out. Okay, great. But now if Q1 last year was actually only 20%, the chances of me getting to 25% is going to be really hard, because we know that that's the run rate of the business of how it comes in. There's a pattern of why it comes in that way. So you need to be careful to look at those historical trends as we start to look at the new over assignment that the seasonality of what you would like to hit. So again, take them up bit by bit. If you want to get from a 20% quarter to a 25% quarter, you're probably going to need to go to 22, then 24, and then probably 25. But again, it all depends on your businesses, of how that does, but super important to be able to look at that. Okay, so step 1 is getting from targets to quotas. Step 2 is setting your seasonality. Now that you know your seasonality, now it's okay, well, how do we start to calculate the commission rate? And I'm not going to go too much into comp plans here. That's a whole nother session and a whole nother world. But you should have an idea of, when we roll in our quotas, what are we expecting to pay out for those quotas? So what we tend to do is we take this variable component, what we call the variable component, of what the person is able to earn. So for the year, let's say the variable component is 100,000, and we divide that by the quota. So the quota for this person in particular will be $500,000 or $500,000. So that divided by the other, it gives you a 20% commission rate. So that means for every dollar the person's going to bring in, or every deal, they're going to get paid a 20% commission rate in general. Now there's rules that get set. You might say, okay, great. OTE, what it's called, you're going to earn 100,000 and your commission rate's 20%. But that's if you're at 100%. You might set it up that if you're at 90% attainment, you might not get 20%. It might be 18% commission rate because you're going to decelerate because you're not getting to the full 100%. There's different methodologies, or you might be over 100% and then you can start to accelerate. So we'll accelerate people. So your commission rate might go from 20% to 22% or 24%.